Spring is finally here. Deer season is long since over. This past weekend, I took all my trail cameras down, including my cellular trail cameras, and we thought it'd be a good time to do a follow-up video to our review that we did last summer. This is just going to be a quick follow-up video talking about the likes and dislikes of each of the systems and the brands. We're not going to get real deep into the plan pricing or the prices of the units themselves. I do want to reiterate, however, that we are not partnered or sponsored by any of these brands. If you'd like to see the full review that I did last summer, I'll put a link down in the description below. And we'd also like to know if you ran any of these units and have the same experiences that I did or different. If your experiences were different, we'd like to hear it either way. So please comment down below as well. Before I get started, I want to ask for your forgiveness. During the fall and winter months, while the cameras were in operation, I kept some notes and I want to be able to refer to those notes. So here we go. I'm going to start with the SpyPoint brand, specifically the Link Micro and the Cuddelink units. In all fairness, I did not or do not have any of their other models, so I don't know how they work. This is just going to be solely on the Cuddelink and the Link Micro. As you can see, both of the units are small, good size to throw in your pack. If you want to set a bunch of them out, you got to hike in somewhere. Really nice size. That was one thing I liked about them. There weren't many, to be honest. They upgraded the app at some point during the early fall or middle of the fall, and the new app seems to work a lot quicker, a lot smoother, and it does appear a lot cleaner. Functionality-wise, it's all the same as the old app. Battery life in each of the units was outstanding. I just pulled the Cuddelink off the tree 3 or 4 days ago, and it was still operating after I had put it up the first week of August, I believe. Again, run lithium ions in pretty much all my cell cams, with the exception of the Cuddebacks. So battery life on the SpyPoints was pretty doggone good. As far as the dislikes, yeah, that's unfortunately all the likes that I really kind of had. The Link Micro specifically, I don't know why they don't have it, but inside the camera you cannot do a 30-second delay. You go from 10-second delay to a minute delay. The reason I don't like not having a 20, 30, or 40-second delay is if you think about during the pre-rut or the rut, a doe walks by, the buck that is following her, he may be 20, 30, 40 seconds behind her, and you're never going to know he was even in the area. So not real high on that. I don't know why they have a burst mode. You can take 1, 2, or 3 shots, but then your delay is 10 seconds or a minute, and then it goes up from there. So not real keen on that. With both of the cameras, or the units, this is not a camera, but with both of the units, there's no ability to do an over-the-air firmware update. And we'll get to that a little bit more as I go further down the line here, but you basically have to download the firmware to a mini SD card, go out to the field and upload the firmware and update the camera in the field. So that'll come more into play as we go down the line here, but I'd like to have the ability to do true over-the-air updates. With the Link Micro, also another thing that I did not care for is the sensitivity. Inside the app, you're supposed to be able to adjust the PIR sensitivity from low to medium to high. I did not see a difference with any of them. Seemed like the camera was taking the same amount of photos no matter what sensitivity setting I had it on, and I did get a lot of blank photos, so I was eating up a lot of data. If a bird flew by or a leaf so much as blew by, the camera was going off, so I ate up a lot of data that was unnecessary to eat up. Another thing I had a lot of issues with was the signal strength of the units. I had them within 100 yards of both the Cuddeback and the Spartan cameras, which had no issues. The SpyPoint brand would bounce anywhere from 25% to 90%, and I couldn't figure it out for no rhyme or reason. Now, even with the updated firmware, which is supposed to give you better signal strength, I just simply wasn't getting it. So that was another issue that I had. On to the Cuddelink unit. As you can see, it is a pretty small unit. You pair it up with a non-cellular trail camera, and the way it's supposed to work with all non-cellular trail cameras. Not necessarily the case. I ran mine with a StealthCam G45NG and also had it paired with a covert camera. Can't remember which model of covert it was, but it did work with those units. Where the problem starts to come in is with the cable itself. Now, again, how this works is you plug this into the Cuddelink unit, and on the other end of this cable is an SD card, which goes into your non-cellular trail camera. Again, in my case, a StealthCam or a covert camera. Where the problem lies is in the cable connection to the SD card. If you don't put it in just right and be really careful, you're going to strip this cable, the protective coating on the cable, and could render the SD card and basically the entire cable unusable. Also, something that you really have to keep in mind is if you're using it on a newer trail camera, it could void your warranty. Reason being is as soon as you run this cable out the door of your trail camera, it's going to render the weatherproof seal not weatherproof. So something to keep in mind there. Again, it worked for me. It was a nice unit. Didn't have any real issues other than signal strength, but something to keep in mind that it could void your warranty. The last thing you need to kind of keep in mind if you're going to run the Cuddelink unit is that it relies on your non-cellular trail camera for all the pictures, and that's where all your data is technically going to come from. So basically how it works is this takes an image, sends it through that cable to a mini SD card inside the unit. The unit then downsamples the picture and sends it to your app. Where all that comes into play is if you've got only a certain allotted amount of pictures and you've got obstructions or things blowing in front of your trail camera, or it's a super sensitive trail camera, you're going to use up data pretty quickly. So one more thing to keep in mind there. I'll touch real quick on the plans for the SpyPoint brand. They are a little bit more expensive, especially on the lower two tiers, than the rest of the trail cameras, specifically the StealthCam Fusion and the Spartan camera. The SpyPoints do get cheaper, however, than the other brands once you go to the unlimited plan. But if you're just simply putting it on a trail and not necessarily on a mineral or bait source, I am not sure that you'd want to use these if you want to spend less money. I would go with the StealthCam Fusion, frankly. On to the Cuddeback Cuddelink system and the Powerhouse cellular camera. I still like the idea behind the system, but it does have some disadvantages. Essentially, I can put up to 24 cameras out into the field within a certain range, and they will all report either to the home base or to the cellular camera, which then, of course, sends it to the web portal. So basically, if I was going to report to the home base, I'd have to go out and pick up the SD card off of this, and I could then see what all the other cameras have recorded. It does downsample them. It's not full resolution. Same with the Powerhouse cellular camera, whereas the camera itself is recording the full resolution image. It's then downsampling and sending it to the Powerhouse, which then sends it again to the web portal. The price plan of this system is a little bit out of range if you ask me. You can get 2,000 images, but that's going to cost you $20 a month. Pretty expensive when you consider the other cameras. For $20 a month, the StealthCam gives you unlimited images. For $13 a month, the SpyPoint gives you unlimited images. I understand that you're getting 9 cameras, 24 cameras, whatever the case may be, you're getting all those images. So are they technically cellular cameras? I don't know, but I think you'd be able to get somewhere around 10, 20,000 images for $20 a month. Such is not the case, unfortunately. So I would not recommend putting these on any sort of bait or a feeder unless you were going to do the unlimited plan, which is $40 a month. Pretty expensive comparatively. Outside of that, they did have pretty good flash range, really good trigger speed, as Cuddeback is known for. Signal strength on both the remote cameras and the actual cellular camera was really good. In fact, I had one of the remote cameras that was set up at 500 or so yards through timber, across a creek, and through some more timber, and I had no problems with signal strength. It tested anywhere from 60 to 80 on signal strength. So better than advertised. I think they advertised 400 yards line of sight. On the flip side, I did have some cameras that were a little bit closer that didn't test quite as well. They want you to have a signal of 20 or above. Nonetheless, I was 40 or above with all the cameras, had really no issues as far as signal strength. Let's move on to the dislikes with the Cuddeback units. Well, first of all, I think what's most noticeable is the size of these bad boys. That thing is as big as my head, and it is heavy. It takes D-cell batteries. So it's not something that you're gonna wanna just throw in your pack or be able to throw in your pack and lug around a bunch of these things. Same thing goes for the home base and for the J cameras, which are your remote cameras. Now, this does have the D-cell battery pack on the back of it. The A-cell pack is a little bit smaller, but still, that's a pretty big camera, easily recognized by game and by other hunters, etc. Another thing that I really did not care for with the J cameras, the remote cameras as it were, is the battery life is terrible. When you get them, they're gonna come with a battery pack on the back that takes 12 AA's. When I had those out in the field, they lasted less than 50 days. I switched this particular one to a D-cell pack and it made it about 200 days. So I got about 4 times the battery life. They advertise that you'll get about 3 times. I happen to get 4. But again, it's a big camera, and once you throw 6 AA's or 6 D-cells in there, it's gonna get even heavier. You can also get an external battery pack, which takes 6 D-cells, and you can run that into either the J camera or into your Powerhouse, which is what I ended up having to do. The home base, it takes D-cells. I believe it's 4 D-cells is what it takes. But yeah, again, the units are really pretty large. So battery life was less than desirable. With the cameras themselves, one thing that I was really disappointed in is I like to run a burst mode. Whether I take 1, 2, or 3 shots, you do not have the ability to do that. And even if you did, you would only get the first picture. What you can do is set it up in surveillance mode where the camera will take a picture and it will reset itself as fast as possible, which Cuddeback says is around 2 seconds. I tend to believe that because I did get some pretty decent recovery time from what I could tell, but there's no burst mode at all. You can set a delay down to 5 seconds, 15, 20, and on up, but there is no burst mode. I can't take 2 or 3 shots, have them sent to the home base or the cell camera and see what's in those shots. No ability to do that. Firmware updates are handled much the same way that the SpyPoint brand handles them, in that you download the firmware update to an SD card, you go out to the field and you upload it to your home camera or your cellular camera, reset the camera, put in all your settings, and then you also have to go around to each of your remote cameras, whether it's 2, 3, 4, 9, whatever the case may be, update the firmware in those and reset the camera and then put all your settings back in. Not the most convenient way to do things, and it's something that you might want to hold off until the end of the season to do. Onto the StealthCam Fusion camera. As you can tell, it's about the size of my hand, which I really like. I can throw a bunch of them in my pack and just go set them out in the woods. The photo quality did get better after they did a firmware update. Prior to the firmware update, it did seem that when you got the pictures in the app, they were a little bit more pixelated than you'd like them. But again, after the firmware update, everything seemed to be better. Battery life was outstanding. I have 8 lithium ions in here that have been operating this camera since, I believe, around the first week of September. Here it is, second week of March, and it still was running this past weekend when I took it down. So that's awesome. Flash range was really good. I could see animals and see what they were out to probably 30-ish yards. So that would be, what, 90 feet, I guess, if my quick math is correct. So that's what I could see. I'd like to know if you guys all had the same experience. Solid trigger speed, not the fastest, not the slowest. As for dislikes on the StealthCam Fusion, one thing that I didn't quite understand is that their non-cellular trail cameras have the ability to adjust the PIR sensitivity. Their non-cellular trail cameras, you can go from near field to standard to extended. Can't do that, can't adjust it at all on the Fusion. There's also no video mode. Not sure how important that is in a cellular trail camera because it will eat up your data plan. I don't particularly use video mode very often in my cellular cameras, but it would be nice to have. It also does not have the ability, as of now, I think they are working on it, to download an HD image, whereas you can do that with the Spartan and you can do it with the SpyPoint. You cannot do it with the Cuddeback either. But it would be nice to be able to download and zoom in a little bit and not get a bunch of pixelation on an image that you think might be important to you. Firmware updates are handled a little bit differently than the Cuddeback or the SpyPoint brand in that you don't necessarily download to an SD card per se. However, you do still have to be at the camera. Basically how it works is once you're at the camera, you go into your app, find the camera that you need to update, press a couple buttons, pull the battery pack out, put it back in. You may have to turn the camera off and put it back on. I don't remember that exactly. Press a couple more buttons and boom, your firmware is updated once the camera goes through its paces. It's kind of nice in that it tells you right there, firmware is up to date. I did have some issues with the SpyPoint where the firmware wouldn't take, or I couldn't tell if the firmware took at all. But with the StealthCam, I did not have any issues there. Last but not least is the Spartan GhostCam. If you watched our first review, you know that I also run 2 of their GoCams. Not a whole lot of difference spec-wise between the 2 cameras. They're both the same size, both 8 megapixel cameras, and both really, quite frankly, good cameras. The big difference between the GhostCam and the GoCam comes internally, and also you get a little bit more functionality inside the app with the GhostCam. The GhostCam internally runs off a 4-volt rechargeable battery that is part of the camera. The GoCam is a 6-volt system. Both cameras you can run 12-volt AA's inside. With the GoCam, you can only run a 6-volt external battery to it. With the GhostCam, I can run a 12-volt HME solar battery pack to it that keeps the 4-volt charged. As a backup, I did also run 12 lithium-ion AA's inside. The cool thing is I only had to change my external solar battery pack 1 time throughout the entire season. That's from July until March. Pretty impressive. Picture quality, I think, was probably the best of the group, with the StealthCam being a close second. Battery life, again, when paired with the HME solar battery pack, was simply awesome. The app, I think, is the most intuitive of all of the apps. Even though it doesn't necessarily sort bucks from does for you, you have the most flexibility and most functionality with the Spartan app. Again, if you want to see more on that, you can go watch the review that we did last summer, link down below. You also get true over-the-air updates with both models of the Spartan camera. Inside the app, if you go to camera status, you'll notice at times that there is a firmware update available. You simply click on the button, and next time the camera communicates with the server, it will update automatically and you are good to go. I have not had a single issue when it comes to firmware updates on the Spartan cameras. As far as dislikes, functionality-wise, I really don't have any. You do have the ability to do video clips, but you are limited to 10 seconds. Camera price is rather salty. However, I do believe this is where that age-old adage of you get what you pay for really kind of comes in. Of the brands up here, my top 2 cameras are the StealthCam Fusion camera and the Spartan Ghost camera. Extremely budget friendly. You can find the StealthCam Fusion for $120 to $150 depending on when and where you buy. Flexibility and functionality of the app, reliability of the camera, Spartan camera wins hands down. So that's it for these 4 particular brands and their respective models up here. Troy and Richie ran a Tacticam Reveal Cam this past fall and winter. It was obviously all the rage last fall, and I'm really interested to see what they have to say about their experience with that particular brand and camera. That'll be coming up later in June. Again, we'd also like to hear about your experiences with any of the brands. Leave us a comment in the section down below and let us know if they were similar or different than ours. That's going to do it. We appreciate you watching The Will Hunt Life, and we'll see you next time.